Welcome to this edition of the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. We've got another special guest today. I'm Helinski. Thank you so much for joining us today. 1965 graduate of Bishop Gibbons, only spent 1 year there, All Catholic League in football, the one and the only Dale Wilson. Dale, glad you could join us. How's things out near Nashville these days?
Well, thank you very much for having me. We moved to Nashville in October, or Franklin, Tennessee, and it's we really like it.
Well, I wasn't gonna blow your cover where you live, because you spent 30 years in the Secret Service and you don't know who may be looking for you these days. So either way, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to talk about your Bishop Gibbons experience. It was very brief. It was only 1 year. You moved from Corfu and you played high school football there for 2 years, sophomore and junior years, and you did quite well there.
Yes.
Your dad worked for Spalding Fiber, and then I guess it was recruited by, he was talked to by Louis Chevelle, and
Yes.
who did the recruiting on you, and you ended up going to Bishop Gibbons, even though you lived in Tonawanda at the time. Your family moved
Yes.
to Tonawanda. Why Bishop Gibbons? There was 2 or 3 or even more Catholic schools, or even Tonawanda or the Kenmore schools at that point where you could have gone.
Well, this happened very quickly when my father made the decision to move. It was like in the winter, late winter of my junior year, and he worked with Louis, and Louis Chevelle's son David was a star at Gibbons in basketball and football, and so we never thought about any other school. For just 1 year, I wasn't going to go to Tonawanda because I know they were a powerhouse, and I wouldn't have, could I have played there? I don't know, but it was Gibbons the whole time. We never considered anything else.
How did your father explain it to your mother that we're moving to Tonawanda? Dale is going to go to Bishop Gibbons High School, and by the way, we're not Catholic.
Well, it just happened. He commuted many years from Corfu. I remember it was 22 miles, which isn't that far today, to Spalding Fiber. And his heart was always in the Tonawandas. He was brought up on Oliver Street in North Tonawanda, and his sisters lived there. His mother lived there. So. And then when we lived in Corfu was where my mom was sort of brought up, Attica actually. So her parents were deceased, so she agreed. I could have stayed at the neighbor's house in Corfu my senior year. I could have stayed there, but I wanted a challenge. I wanted another challenge because we came off a championship season in Corfu. We really had a good football team. We beat Attica, who beat Gibbons the year we won the championship. We crushed Attica, and Gibbons lost to Attica 33-13. So I sort of knew I could play at Gibbons, and I wanted a challenge. I wanted the challenge. I really did. I was sort of tired of Corfu.
Did that challenge extend to coming in, being the new kid on the block, a senior in high school, and them not really knowing much about you and you not knowing much about them?
Right. I didn't know a soul. I did not know a soul. And my first encounter was the first day of practice at Gibbons.
What do you recall from that football season and establishing relationships in that 1964 season?
Well, I recall that, I was readily accepted, and by everybody, and it was a different atmosphere. It was a very good atmosphere. It was a very close-knit school. So I had no problem there. And as far as the season was, we were expected to do very well. We were expected to challenge O'Hara, St. Francis, and Manzetti. And then it was in the papers, they did write-ups in the papers that, Gibbons was going to challenge. And we had a good team. We really did. We had Dave Chabelle was a very good quarterback. He had a great arm. He pitched baseball. He was a pitcher in baseball. And we had Mike Cox, who I consider the best athlete at Gibbons. And we had a good team. But unfortunately, Cox and Chabelle were hurt about the third game of the season, and they were out for the year. We won our first game against Baker Victory, and they weren't very good. We crushed them. We went to Notre Dame that next week. It was a hot Saturday afternoon, and we really had a tight game, a close game with them. And all my Corfu people were there cheering me, and because it was at Notre Dame. And we scored. It was a close game. I caught a touchdown pass, a long touchdown pass, and we scored. And we tied the game up. But I had developed a really serious cramp, and I was a kicker, place kicker, extra point kicker, and it was so bad I couldn't walk. It was a terrible pain. So we missed the extra point. I hobbled back on for the last few minutes, and what happened? There was a Notre Dame threw a pass. It was tipped by Gibbons, and guy caught it and ran into the end zone, and we lost 20 or 19 to 13. And that took a lot of steam out of us. We were never the same after that.
That season, I've looked up the record. That season, you scored 6 touchdowns, kicked 7 extra points.
I scored 7 touchdowns.
Okay, well then there was a misprint when I look back in the record.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Back on FultonHistory.com, but
yeah.
I'm glad you could correct me on that. I wish we could go back in time and correct that as well too.
Well, I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember stuff like that.
Funny how it works that way. You also played basketball at Gibbons as well too, and you were the shooting guard on the team. Had you been a good basketball player at Corfu as well?
I played sophomore and junior. I spent a lot of nights shooting, and back then, you could get into the schools a lot easier than you can today. So I actually could get into our school anytime I wanted to. I was obsessed with shooting. I shot all the time. And my biggest disappointment is there was no 3-point line, because all my, but I was a shooting guard, and it was just from practice, and I just over and over and over and over on cold winter nights. And fortunately at Gibbons, Corfu didn't do that well in basketball, but at Gibbons, Mike Cox was a terrific point guard, terrific. And he was a great passer. He wasn't selfish. He distributed the ball, and I was open so many times, and it was like, it just came natural for me, and I really enjoyed it. I thought about playing basketball in college, but I went to Murray State, and I wouldn't have made it at Murray State. I could have played freshman ball there, but I never would have made the varsity.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't your father that went to a game at the Memorial Auditorium where Murray State was playing Canisius? And so he said you should really write a letter to the coaches at Murray State and then, plead your case to see if you could get in for football. And you did.
That's correct. My father was a big Canisius College fan. He had season tickets. And for some reason, I didn't go to that game. And Canisius played Murray in the odd. That's when basketball was really big up there, the St. Bonaventure and all that. And he came home and he said he liked Murray State. And at that time, some schools were looking at me, some D3 schools, Elford and St. Lawrence, and then some D2 schools. down in Pennsylvania, Edinburgh and Mansfield, but none of them offered much, you know. And so don't ask me. So he said, "But I really like Murray State." So I wrote the coach, Don Shelton, and he got back to me and said, you know, you know, they always say this. I gave up our scholarships are all gone, but you can certainly come down as a preferred walk-on, because I sent him my clippings and all that. And then he said, and you can eat at the training table. So I applied and I got in, and actually Moorhead State was in the same conference, the Ohio Valley Conference. They offered, I don't know how they got my name, but they offered me the same thing. But I went to Murray, and the rest is history. Yeah. I never set foot in Murray. And when I went to Murray, I did not know a soul. Murray was the South. It was in Western Kentucky. They were pro-South. Eastern Kentucky was pro-North during the Civil War. So I had a real education.
Quite the culture shock for you, and vice versa.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was.
They said we have a Yankee boy here.
Yes, there were a few of us, but you know, it's when I think back, I probably wasn't accepted as well at Murray as I was at Gibbons by a lot of the good old boys. There were a lot of guys from Tennessee that played a lot, and then of course a lot from Murray, from Kentucky.
Okay, so you played a couple years. You played safety, and you played on special teams as well too. And after the second year, the head coach was terminated, relieved of his duties. New coach came in and started fresh and cleared everything out. And you kind of knew the writing was on the wall for yourself as well. And as you wrote to me, you said you discovered other things. You joined a fraternity, and you discovered girls. So I mean, I guess all was well at that point.
Yeah, it was interesting. Actually, the first year I was there, we were 2-6-2. My father came down to see me play, and we tied Eastern Kentucky, and they were really good. I mean, they were really good. We tied them, and that was about our only achievement for the year. We finished 2-6-2, and the sophomore year was a total disaster. Many players basically just gave up. We went down and played Austin P in Clarksville on a Saturday night. It was a big rivalry, and they had 7-0 at halftime. They came out and beat us 49-0. They brought us back on the bus and made us practice that night. I kid you not.
Wow.
And beat it, and it was I'll never forget that. So the new coach came in and cleaned house, and you know, when I talked to him, he didn't encourage me, and so I said, you know, I was gonna, and it was a grind. You know, it was football is really big down south, and you know, we were back practicing in December. You know, when I say practicing, winter conditioning, and it you know, it was a grind, and so I said, I joined a national fraternity and had fun my last 2 years.
After college, you moved down to Atlanta. You coached a little high school football. You were probably the advanced scout, and you did a lot of film as well too. You also came to the realization that you weren't going to become a head coach down in the South because those jobs are not given to guys from the North.
That's correct. The coach at it was Columbia High School, and the coach was from Auburn, and he was it was like running it was like Alabama today. I mean, he was in the film and scouting. I never saw one of our games live. I scouted every game, and then on Sundays we would come in at 6 p.m. and watch film until 12 midnight, and then we would do game plans Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, meet the parents. I was exhausted after the season, But I learned a lot. I learned so much. Now, have you ever heard of Valdosta High School? Famous Valdosta High School.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We were 9-1. We really had a good team. We had 3 kids go on to major college. One of them, which was our running back, he actually played for the Chargers. He went to the University of Georgia. I mean, football is so serious down there. It's unbelievable. I mean, every game was 6 to 8 to 10,000 people. So anyways, we had our first playoff game, and he sent me down to Valdosta to scout, because if we would have won that game, we would have played Valdosta. So I went down there, and they treated me like a king. They gave me barbecue and put me up in the press box, and they sort of laughed at me. They said, "Why are you here?" And then about midway through the game, they couldn't wait to tell me that they got a call. You know, they used to use the telephone on all the scores, and that we got beat by Lakeside. So the season was over. So I just folded my notebook up and said thank you and went home. But I saw that. I used to go to the TNT games. My father used to take me. They were great games, and I still remember them. Rick Casada and John Chisera. I mean, they were great games. But when you went down to Valdosta, it was unbelievable. That's all I can say. It was just football at its highest. And but anyways, I left there and joined the Secret Service that next year. I did 2 years actually coaching, and then that fall, November 1st, right in the middle of the season, my second year, I joined the Secret Service.
Is that something that you plan for, or there's something? It's not like one of those things you do on a lark. Hey, I'm going to join the Secret Service. I mean,
Okay.
and you've got to have impeccable character and impeccable morals, and you are thoroughly vetted.
Yes. Well, you know, I had a coach at my high school, good guy. He came back one day and said, "I heard the FBI and the Secret Service are hiring." And I didn't want to go with the FBI. I just didn't appeal to me. And I thought about the Secret Service, and then I set up set up an interview, and I actually interviewed with the boss, and then I interviewed with a guy that he said, "I want you to interview with this one of my top agents." Well, he happened to play football in the same high school as Bart Starr. He played on the same team as Bart Starr, and he played at Alabama. I mean, he also played at Alabama, and we hit it right off. So he obviously went in and told the boss, "Hey, I like this guy," and they hired me.
All right, fast forward a little bit to your Secret Service career.
Yes.
You were a primary caretaker, for lack of a better way of saying it, for Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, President Jimmy Carter, President Ronald Reagan, and VP H.W. Bush.
Yes.
Got to be an intense job with a lot of pressure, and I admire anyone with the Secret Service for keeping their composure at all time and showing the utmost professionalism. What was that experience like?
Well, a kid from Buffalo or Western New York, I never dreamt that I'd be in that position, but it was something I wouldn't trade for anything. Wonderful people, wonderful memories, hard work, long hours, gone all the time, great retirement. You know, it's just, I have so many memories. I've met so many famous people. I mean, I actually talked to them: Ted Williams, Stan Musial, Yogi Berra, Tommy Lasorda, just on and on and on. But, you know, I was with Kissinger, and back then we didn't protect Kissinger, but Kissinger was going to Israel and traveling all over the world with the Egyptian, Israeli peace accords and all that. He wanted Secret Service protection. So President Nixon gave him Secret Service protection. That was my first assignment. I was a year and a half, traveled the world. And I don't say that gingered. I traveled the world for a year and a half. I mean, I was gone all the time. Kissinger was wonderful. He treated us like gold. I stayed in the best hotels. I was so spoiled. It was unbelievable, but it was a lot of work. And then after Jimmy Carter became president, of course, Kissinger was out of office. He was with the Republican administration. So they transferred me, they moved me over to the Carter detail. So I was there with him almost 4 years. And then I also served I was with Wrazin Carter on her detail. I drove the president. I did everything an agent would do. Then I went with Reagan for about a year. And then I was transferred off. That's a long time, 5-6 years on protection. And so I was transferred off. And then I was brought back a few years later to be a supervisor on the Vice President George Bush detail. And then after that, I got into administration. And my final 7 years, I was the head of our intelligence division, which was very challenging.
During all of this, when did you get married?
1970. Yeah, my wife's from, she went to Murray State. Yeah, we met there, and then we were married that summer, and she taught school, and then for a couple years, and then took care of the kids. Yeah, she's been a trooper. We've been married over 50 years now. Yeah, 51 years. But she brought up the kids. She took care of the house. I mean, we were gone a lot. In the Secret Service, they don't ask you, they tell you. You get an assignment and you don't ask questions, you do it. You do as you're told. And that's how you're trained.
May I ask you something about during the Reagan years? Were you still active protecting President Reagan during the assassination attempt?
Yes, I wasn't there then. I mean, I was off duty, but yes. Yeah, and the man who actually saved the president after that made the decision after, when they pushed him into the car, they were heading to the White House, and his name was Jerry Parr, a wonderful man. He's deceased now, Vanderbilt graduate, just a wonderful man. He determined that they needed to go to GW Hospital because he saw some blood, and and Reagan, the doctors said, would not have made it if they would have gone to the White House. He was bleeding to death. And Jerry, everybody did the right thing. They trained, they did the right thing. And Jerry and I became very good friends. He became my mentor.
Now, during this time, you transitioned from the Secret Service or still maintained some affiliation with them, but you became part of the Inspector General's office.
Yes, a man I worked for in the Secret Service, he became the Inspector General at Department of Labor. It's a big job, Inspector General, testifying before Congress and all that. So, and I had worked for him, and we were very good friends. And he asked me to come over there to work, and I worked as his executive assistant and some other jobs over there. And then he went on to DOD, Department of Defense, as the IG. But I stayed back at Labor and did 15 years there and then retired.
Looking back at that, did you ever think to yourself or stop and pinch yourself and say, look what this kid from Western New York has made out of himself, or where this has all led to?
I think about that all the time, how blessed I was. It's just, when you think of, it's when you think of how all everything got lined up. My father wouldn't have gone to that game, who knows where I'd be. But I call it a miracle, and God had a plan for me, and and to this day and age, I'm so thankful that I had an opportunity to go to Gibbons. I give Gibbons a lot of credit. Gibbons was very good educational wise too, much better than a public school. I got more out of that year at Gibbons than I did the 3 years at Corfu. It was an excellent education.
You said to me, without this Gibbons experience, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah.
Explain what that means.
Well, that's because, I didn't know where Kentucky was. And I'm going back to Murray State, but, it's just, I just shake my head when I think about it, and it all happened so fast, and that I chose the right school. And I just, and like I said, the kids, the atmosphere of Gibbons was tremendous. They supported you in the games. Today I go to games and the kids don't go to the games. It's the parents, but there, we had, a real nice following of students and crowds that attended our games,
Maybe you've done this, maybe you haven't, but if you run into somebody that you don't know and you start to strike up a conversation talking about high school football or your high school experience, what would you tell people or have told people about Bishop Gibbons?
Oh, it was a great school. I just wish we would have had a better year, because we could have had a better year. And, we were never hammered. The only team that really beat us bad was Minzetti. Every other game we were pretty much in it. Gibbons was just I was sorry when my father called me in 1972 and said, Gibbons is closing. And it was only, I think it was less than 10 years. And it was it really saddened me, because, I understand the situation with the economy and what happened in Western New York. And I still follow Buffalo and read Buffalo News and all that. But it was just the right timing for me. And I just think of Louis Chabelle and my father talking, and hey, he should go to Gibbons. So, yeah, and being non-Catholic, the only thing Father Shoy, who was the principal, the only thing he asked that I take religion, and I took religion 4, and I enjoyed it because it was all new experience to me.
What were you brought up at? What religion were you brought up at?
Presbyterian.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've talked about a few different things with this conversation. What would you like to talk about that I haven't asked you?
Well, I just think the boys, the kids that I played with at Gibbons they were all good kids. They really meant well. And like I say, Mike Cox, I saw him at the reunion a couple of years ago. He was just a tremendous athlete. And I just, and David Chabelle was a very good basketball player and a pitcher. And, I saw these kids the guys at the reunion, and my only regret is that we didn't have a better team. And it was just because our coach, Hank Lewis, I thought he was a pretty good coach. And my coach at Corfu was Bernie Fagan. He played on the 1958 undefeated UB football team. And he was he really he was an excellent coach. He actually had us running audibles. So, and then what's ironic is the next year, the year after I graduated, Gibbons played Notre Dame for the championship in the Smith Division Catholic League. Guess who the coach of Notre Dame was? Bernie Fagan. So that's ironic, but I love playing at Vetter Stadium and the small, and we played our O'Hara at Clint Small Stadium, and we only had a couple of home games. I never could figure that out, but we had, and I enjoyed going on the road, playing at Minzetti and Ole and Bishop Walsh and that.
at Gibbons, what was the equipment like?
It was better than Corfu. It was good. We actually, I remember in basketball, we actually had warm-ups. We had warm-up pants and all that. Yeah, the equipment was very good. The only thing I wished we had is we had the leather helmets. They were just going into the Riddell, I call them plastic helmets, and we didn't have those. And I got my bell rung a couple times. You know, when thinking back, I had a headache. But when I went to Murray State, they had the new helmets, and they were a big difference. Let me tell you, huge difference.
Dale Wilson, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this YouTube interview on the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame. It's been a pleasure to meet you. Fascinating story. I've never spoken to anyone from the Secret Service one way or another, and I plan on keeping it that way. I mean, you're my first and probably going to be my last, but that's good. I wish you well. I wish you good health. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Well, it was an honor and pleasure. And the Tonawandas, I still have a lot of great memories. And I'm going to get back up there again pretty soon. Hope to get together with Bob LaBarbera and the gang. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Be well.
Bye.